Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Primary Maths Podcast, the show where we talk all things primary maths. I'm John Cripwell. My guests today are two brilliant educators from Scotland who have been leading fascinating work on maths journaling, an approach that helps children make their thinking visible and find their mathematical voice. If you've ever wondered what maths journaling actually is, what it isn't, and how it might change the culture of your classroom, then this is the episode for you. And if you happen to be a fan of the Traitors, you'll want to listen out for this Friday's After Maths episode. There's a connection, I promise. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss that or any of our future episodes. Last week, I spoke to the brilliant Leonie Briggs all about how we can link science and maths and the arts to bring those subjects to life for our pupils. Go back and have a listen to that if you are interested at all in STEM or STEAM or just science and maths in general. And in our After Maths episode 20, Becky and I somehow managed to cover all sorts of things, including Colin Firth, mathematical vocabulary, and a surprising bit of etymology. But for now, let's dive straight into this week's interview. Today, I'm joined by two passionate educators from Scotland with over 25 years of experience between them across primary schools and university settings. I first met them just a couple of weeks ago, not in Scotland, but in Wales, where we were both presenting a workshop at the Thinking Deeply About Primary Education conference in Cardiff. I joined their session. They didn't join mine, but I won't hold it against them. And I enjoyed it so much that I immediately asked if they would like to come and speak to us on the podcast. Together, they've been exploring something that has been talked about for years, it feels like, and sits right at the intersection of mathematics, metacognition, and self-expression. We're thinking about maths journaling today. We'll be talking about what maths journaling is, what it isn't, and how it can transform classroom practice. My guests today are Dr. Kirsten Fenton and Holly Drummond. Sorry, I'll do that again. See, I did tell you. My guests today are Dr. Kirsten Fenton and Holly Drummond, and I'm delighted to have them on the show. Welcome, Kirsten and Holly.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
You were just saying...
Session. Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. I won't hold it against you. It's fine. We were just saying before the podcast recording started, this is your first podcast, which I find hard to believe. I'm sure it will not be your last. But you guys are actually on holiday when we're recording this. It's school holidays up in Scotland.
It is. So we've got a lovely 2 weeks off on holiday right now. So yeah, nothing like
Very
starting
nice.
off your holiday by working.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I was just thinking. Thank you very much for giving over some of your school holidays to talk to us about maths journaling. But I do know that it is something that you're passionate about. I could tell that at the conference, given that you were willing to travel from whereabouts in Scotland are you guys?
So I'm in Edinburgh, just outside Edinburgh, but Holly travelled the furthest.
From Inverness. So I used to work with Kirsten and now up in Inverness, back in the Highlands. So yeah, a flight down to Cardiff, to Bristol, then Cardiff. So
yeah, exactly. If you're willing to go that far to talk about maths journaling, then it must be something that you are passionate about, which I love. So on the show, we always like to just dive into a little bit about what maths was like for you at school. So maybe, Holly, if we start with you first, what was maths like when you were at school?
So primary school maths, I actually really enjoyed, and I would say was quite successful at, and felt that I had a good grasp of what was going on. It was a subject I enjoyed. I didn't dread it when we knew it was coming in the day. However, into secondary school, began to find things a little bit more challenging. At the time, I sat Scottish exams. It was standard grades and then highers. And certainly by the time I got to higher, I was really struggling quite a bit. I needed to get a tutor and things to be able to pass my higher maths. And I think that's something that we see quite often, is that children are quite confident maybe in primary stages, but at that secondary stage drift off and perhaps have that more divide. And we were talking about people either identifying as mathematicians or not by quite a young age these days. So yeah, I sort of struggled a bit later on. And then at university doing my postgrad teaching, that wasn't an area that was perhaps covered in depth. You had some lectures on how to teach maths, so it wasn't really until you're in the classroom and trying to explain concepts to children that perhaps you've not touched for several years that you begin to think about your own maths competency and how to explain things to children, how to make them understand how to do things.
It's a
plan it.
different yeah, it's a different sort of subject knowledge, I think, required to teach something than it is to maybe pass an exam in it. So yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kirsten, did you want to take over?
I was probably the complete opposite because I hated maths at school all the way from when I was very little. Even now, I still have a sort of fear of teaching maths. It's definitely one of the areas of the curriculum that I have to focus in on and really explore how I'm going to teach it and how to get the best out of our learners and children. I was that child who avoided teacher eye contact at all times and just sat very quietly. Hopefully, I probably thought I was just taking it in by osmosis, but clearly didn't. I really didn't like it. I couldn't wait to drop out as soon as I got to secondary school. As soon as I got that first set of exams, I was like, no. So I do actually feel like a bit of an imposter now because I'm now, as you've rightly said, very passionate about teaching maths and about using maths journaling to help the children that we work with.
Fantastic. And regular listeners will know that I probably associate a little bit more with you, Kirsten, in that maths was not my subject at school at all. So to spend my life talking and thinking about maths now, it just seems bizarre. So it's funny how that can happen. And you know, sometimes I think that can make a good teacher, the fact that...
Yeah, I think it probably adds to our strengths because we've got an understanding of that maths anxiety that we've talked about before and trying to make it accessible to children.
And it probably works quite nicely when you used to work together. And I know obviously you are still working together a little bit now, but having that balance, I suppose, of different perspectives on it is interesting too. So did you both go straight into teaching? Was that kind of the career path?
No, so I worked for a long time at university. So my PhD is actually in, of all things, medieval history. So I'm an expert in the 12th century.
Right, we'll get you on the sister podcast for this. That's fine.
So yeah, and then I did my postgrad 1-year course after I had my third child and got into primary school teaching that way. I guess it was always a bit of a family business. My parents were both primary school head teachers, so there was always that draw. I've always been around schools and education my whole life.
There was
so yeah,
an inevitability about it. You resisted long enough, but yeah, it got you in the end. Yeah. How about yourself, Holly?
Yeah, so my undergraduate was actually in international relations. So a bit more of a political side to me, which I've continued with my trade union representation and things as well. And then worked in a special education school in their after school club and holiday club up in Inverness, as well as working in a nursery. And also had a daughter by then too. So it sort of drew me in terms of thinking about how I could work with children in a really practical way. My mum was also a teacher, as was my granddad. He was a headmaster of a primary school. So I think, again, there was that being around teaching, being around education growing up, having an understanding of what's involved in many ways, but also seeing all of the good side of it as well, the passion, the involvement, the children seeing my mum in the street and things and having that conversation and being that teacher they remember, and wanting to make that difference. So did the postgrad course similar to Kirsten in Dundee and have loved it. There's challenging times, as we all know, and lots of pressures and things as well. But ultimately, when you're in your classroom with your 31 or 33 children in front of you, it's just the best job in the world. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're both still teaching now. I know you're not teaching. You obviously did work together previously, but you are both still teaching, just in separate places now.
Yeah, both still teaching full-time
practitioners. Yeah, but we are still continuing to work together on our maths journaling project as well.
Yeah. So let's get into maths journaling a little bit then. Shall we start with the basics? What do we actually mean by maths journaling? Shall we try and clear that up a little bit to start with?
So for us, maths journaling is a pedagogical approach. So it's not something you add into lessons. It's not a plenary task. It's how you're teaching in the classroom. It's how the learning is delivered. And we've thought quite carefully about how we do that, taking on board things from cognitive science, how children learn. We're aware there are schemes and things that have journaling beginning to be built in, and it's quite a conversation beginning to happen. But we feel we've sort of taken a really holistic view as to what we feel journaling is and how we deliver that for our children. our sort of root and core of it is the language and communication. That it is the ability for children to express their mathematical thinking on paper, but also to articulate that in conversations in the classroom as well. And we take quite a robust approach, we feel, in terms of how we do that with our sentence stems, with the modelling of talk, and with building that real oracy within our own classrooms.
Yeah, and sort of providing real life context for children to explore as well. So really thinking about that problem solving approach. But as Holly says, I think oracy is absolutely key. And I think we've discovered that in Scotland that's not a big priority at the moment, although speaking as part of our curriculum for excellence, we find that it's not pushed forward specifically in maths as well. But once children start to use specific disciplinary literacy in maths and speak about maths, their confidence grows. So it's about having that confidence with our learners to use the right vocabulary as well going forward. We've discovered that's really important to our pedagogical approach as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our children, we start our weeks with perhaps a new concept, and we ask them to have their brain dump where they just put down on the page everything they already know. And we use that as our pre-assessment to look at any misconceptions, and to look at how they're modelling or working through what strategies they're using, what it means to them. And then we take a really adaptive and responsive approach to our week, so that we can build our learning from that. We can look at what we want to teach. We have obviously that plan that's in our heads, but we're really taking on board where the children are at, and where we need to get them to, and taking that sort of adaptive approach from there. We move into more sort of that explicit instruction, direct teaching phase of our week as well. So journaling doesn't replace any, proper learning and teaching that's going on in the classroom. And as I say, it's not an add-on, it is just that sort of encompassing approach that we're taking on board.
Can I just jump in at this point? Because you absolutely hear the passion that you're speaking about this, and you're clearly very knowledgeable about it as well. So just on behalf of the listeners, I think I'll just ask a couple of quick questions at this point people might be thinking about. So when you say that you do the brain dump at the start of the week, I love that idea. It's great to find out what do we know, what do we not know, perhaps. I think maybe that's more common in some other topic areas. So I know when we started a history topic or something, but whether it was, let's go with medieval history. What do we already know about the Saxons? What do we want to find out?
Yeah.
With maths, what might that look like, I suppose? Let's say the topic is addition. What sure. We're going to do 2 weeks on addition now. What might a brain dump at the start of an addition unit look like?
So I think to start with, we sort of modelled quite closely what we wanted the brain dumps to look like. So we looked at the learning intentions, we thought about the success criteria, and we incorporated that into an overall schema, if you like, of what we wanted the children to include. So we wanted them to think about key vocabulary that they associated with addition. Mm-hmm. We wanted them to, if they could, talk through a worked example. We wanted them to give us top tips. So if they were teaching addition, what would they want someone to know about addition? If they could think about real life context, so where might you use addition in the big bad world? Where might that be useful to you? And sort of bring that all together. I think what was key, or is key for us, is about making that thinking visible, and about making that thinking visible in a way that makes sense to the learner. So every journal will be individual, every journal will be unique. They are not neat practice pages in your jotter. They are very much messy. They are very much people just getting their thoughts down, and that can be in any way they want. So it doesn't have to be words. Very often our children use diagrams, or they draw pictures. We've had some great ones recently where children have used cartoons and incorporated cartoons into just explaining how they think. So I think one of our big mantras is just show us what you're thinking. How do you
I love that? Yeah, I love that idea. Did you have any pushback from any external visitors to school, or from head teachers or SLT or anything like that about the presentation in your books on journaling days? I shouldn't say journaling days. We've already established that there isn't a journaling day. Every lesson is a journaling session, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, so within their jotters, we still have expectations of setting out procedures. So it's not as much we're saying their jotters are messy and learning is messy. their jotters still follow sort of standard setting out procedures for calculations. So we still have that within it. I think for us, our SLT actually have been very supportive, because the benefits of journaling and being able to come into the classroom and hear the children articulate their thinking or compare jotters with one another and talk through each other's strategy, and even the questions they're using to each other are now so much more elaborate for the age and stage they're at, that very quickly you can see the benefit. And we've had colleagues who are beginning to come on board as well. And when there's been that perhaps hesitation or that uncertainty about, oh, this is a bit different from what I would do for maths, very quickly, because the children actually adapt to it, it fits with how they want to learn. They have that ownership, and when we feel in control of something and we feel we own something, we put more into it. It's ours, and they're more invested in it. So I think them seeing within even a week of trying it what can be produced and how sophisticated their responses can be, or even how reflective their responses can be as well, it's sort of evidence enough. So yeah, we do have the sort of brain dumpy, messy pages, but we also have pages of practice. But they need to practice how to calculate. They need to practice strategies, so that is still within their jotter, but it's all in one place. So they can look back and see, this is where I was at the beginning of this concept. This is me practicing and trying, different ways of working. I've got some reflection in there of where I maybe went wrong or what I need to remember for next time. And here's where I've got to now, applying that to a problem solving challenge or a real world context, or worded questions, and look what I'm able to achieve. And keeping that all together, as we say, is that evidence in itself of the child's journey. It's their math story. It's not just correct calculations and marks out of 10 and very good and move your digits into a box next time. It's very much, here's what you have learnt, and here's who you are as a learner as well.
And I think that's really useful, because the children are able to visibly see it. So they can start at the beginning, and they might not know very much about addition, to take your example, but by the end of that conceptual block of teaching, by the time, as Holly says, you've gone through that practice stage, they've gone and worked through that problem solving, that real life example as a kind of post assessment, then they can visibly see the progress that they've made. And, as a teacher as well, that gives you a little boost as well, because you can be like, look, I have actually taught you something, and you can see how much I've taught you. But for the children and their identity as mathematicians, they can clearly see, and that gives them a confidence boost and boosts their self-esteem as well.
Yeah, I completely see that. I also think it can be a great way of incorporating the pictorial representations and things that maybe you're teaching through. At the start, it may be that children think of addition very much as a number sentence or a column addition, but hopefully as you're teaching, they start to pick up more of those representations and understand the structure a little bit more, and can then articulate it, as you say, in their journaling. Just to be clear for the listeners, this may be a question, I know that I asked this in your session in Cardiff, but this is not a separate book. We're being clear on this. It is part of it's their maths book that they use every day, and it's because it is integrated into the lesson. I have seen it in other schools, other settings where they have both. So they have a sort of maths journal where children can make notes and things that stays with them throughout the year. They keep it in the tray or whatever. But your approach is very much where it is incorporated into their maths book, so it's part of every lesson.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we do that for a couple of reasons, but predominantly so we're not separating the reflection part from the mathematical thinking and the mathematical learning. We're trying to integrate it as much as possible, so they can see the connections, they can understand why something hasn't worked for them, and then be able to make changes and adjust and take on board feedback, rather than it being a separate thinking space. We're thinking when we're learning, so we're thinking in our jotters, so it's keeping it all tied together. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say exactly the same. I think for us, that's very important, especially in terms of sort of metacognition as well. And the research that we looked at for that, we're very keen that children write and record their strategies, but it's all together and it's part of that process and it's part of their identities as learners as well. I don't think that we should see it as separate, because, as we've said, it is part of our pedagogical approach. It is how we are teaching. So it's all sort of encompassing. So no separate jotters for us, I'm afraid.
No, lovely.
As I was about to say, back to what Kirsten's saying about language, it keeps that vocabulary and those worked examples or stem sentences entwined, so they can quickly turn the page and refer back if they need that, reminder for themselves. They're not having to get a separate jotter to find it neatly presented. It's just there on the page in a wee bubble, remembering that equivalence means such and such or whatever it is.
And do you do a sort of class version of that at the same time alongside the children? So when they've done their brain dump, do you pull that together at all, or is it just what's in their books and then you use that to inform your planning?
So a bit of both. We work very much on the understanding that all voices are valid in our classroom. So we do encourage the children to share what they've put down, or they magpie from one another, or can you go and explain to the person next to you, or ask questions of each other. So we want that real equity in our classroom, that there's no, children very quickly, by very young age, be able to tell you in their class who's good at maths.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
trying to break that sort of, what would you say, that
That's a sort of barrier.
yeah, absolutely.
Down.
That they're for some children, then maths is a bit unachievable, or I don't have that innate ability that the person sitting opposite them seems to have. So yeah, we pull up people's examples, we work through things, we ask them to share with one another. But when we're actually teaching, we model on our anchor charts in our classroom, how to use vocabulary, or as you're saying, strategies and examples. And then that's left displayed in the room throughout the week as well, so they can refer to it. They may produce something different in their jotter, but there is an example there for them as well.
And I
So
think-
just for anybody, sorry. Kirsten. Just for anybody who's unfamiliar with the term anchor charts, I know that's been around a little while, but I think maybe Kirsten, it'd just be useful just to clarify what we mean by an anchor chart.
Yeah, that's a question we get asked quite a lot, actually, is what we would use on our anchor chart. So for us, it's very much a sort of, I guess, our brain dump that we've modelled together. We usually pull the information that children have talked about. We usually pull what we think we would like them to know as well, but we would display that on our working wall throughout our week as well, that we could add to that. So as we move through those different strategies or those different representations of additions, so if you're moving to words like number lines, or you're thinking about moving on to partitioning, we start to add that to the wall during the week. So it's always up for the children to refer to. So it feels like it's that inclusivity in the classroom as well. So you've got your sentence stems, you've got your anchor chart with your worked examples, your key teaching methods that you want to talk about, your sentence stems. That's all there for the children to refer to throughout the whole week as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you very much. Just a final point on the brain dump element of it. You mentioned that you might adapt your planning to reflect what the children have shown you in those journaling sessions. Could you give me an example of what that might look like? Surely you're not rewriting whole lesson plans and things at the last minute, are you? Or are you?
There's been times.
There has been times.
No, it's just that looking at, if we see a common misconception within the room, then we need to ensure that we have that covered within the week, rather than just hoping that by continuing on the path that somehow that will be resolved. So it's really trying to pick out places where perhaps there is a misconception, or there's a gap in knowledge.
I know we were both team teaching last year, in fact, and we were I can't remember what we were talking about, but we quickly realised the children had no idea of what an odd number was, which threw us, and we were like, okay, so we're going to now spend a lesson. So it's that kind of adaptivity and responsiveness to where the children actually are, because you're not going to get them to where you thought you were going to get them unless you'd kind of filled in all those gaps as well. But that should be sort of commonplace, you would think, across.
Yeah.
There's no point in sort of ploughing down the path if there's gaps missing. If those building blocks aren't there, then you're only going to end up with a bigger gap later on for the children, or they're only doing something because that's how in Scotland they talk about a chimney sum, which is sort of a column method.
But we didn't realise that was a Scottish thing. So we were talking about that at Cardiff, and people were like, what?
Yeah, a chimney sum. So not the way. So we would have just called that column addition, I guess. But chimney sum, a bit like a bus stop for division. So bus stops, we do have chimneys. I've not really come across before, but if people use that elsewhere in the country, let me know.
I think for them that we're spotting it within that sort of chimney sum concept is that they're just doing it because that's how you do it, but they're not able to explain or understand why, and it's sort of going back and adapting our teaching to ensure that we cover that. So
and I think that's been a bit of a mind shift change for the children as well, because now often Holly and I will be sort of like, well, we're not interested in the actual answer, we're interested in how you got there. And for a lot of our children, they will automatically say, oh, I just know that.
I did in my head.
I've got it in my head. And it's
Yeah,
like, well, no, I need to know what's going on in your head. So that goes back to our whole shows what you're thinking, the
yeah.
importance of visible thinking and learning.
Which links with the oracy work as well, doesn't it? Absolutely. So just to summarise then, the sort of purpose of the brain dump journaling session, and how long might that last? Just quickly.
Oh, not long at all. It's just the beginning. That's our very first sort of input to the week.
Yeah.
Only a few minutes or so, just to
A few minutes, yeah, perfect.
yeah.
Okay, so the purpose of that, I suppose, might be dual in so much as it shows you what the children know and maybe what their misconceptions are, but it also gives them an opportunity to retrieve prior
Yeah,
knowledge
yeah,
as well and to reflect on that before they start the new
yeah.
unit of learning. So, would you ever give them example questions or anything to have a look at that point, or would it just be purely just whatever's in their head?
Mm. Probably not at that point because we're more interested in what they actually know. So you're right, picking up on that retrieval practice. But I think the kind of worked example or the worked question probably come later in our week. We'd probably more kind of use that for a post-assessment rather than a pre-assessment.
Great. Okay. So that's brilliant. We've spoken for about 20 minutes on that very first little bit of the week. But I think it's important, just people are listening to this to really understand the purpose of these things and what it might look like in practice, which is why it's great to have you guys who can go into some detail on it for us. So moving on from there, then, what might journaling look like as an integral part of a lesson then? And I realise that might be not a straightforward answer and isn't going to look the same every day.
Yeah.
But just typically, what might you be? I suppose actually the question is, when you're planning the lesson, what is it that's in your mind? How do you want to utilise this pedagogy of journaling to help develop children's understanding?
Sure. I think a lot of it is to do with thinking or ourselves thinking at the very start. So it's what do we want the children to know at the end of a particular concept that they don't know at the beginning? Which sounds really obvious, but actually when you start to break it down, is really complicated. So it might be sort of key phrases or key strategies that we would want our children to understand that they wouldn't know at the beginning. And that would give us the movement towards what we'd call our stop and jot. So sometimes during a lesson, we're like, we really need you to know this. Can you record this for us? And it doesn't have to be written down beautifully. It's got to make sense to them as learners. So again, that's where we're encouraging that creativity. That's where we're encouraging them to draw. That's where we encourage them to think about different strategies. But it'd be something that we would want them to know. So that's where we would kind of have our stop and jot as we went through that lesson would be one thing that we do after our brain dump, after we've done that pre-assessment, after we've thought, okay, so we need to cover X, Y, and Z. Once we'd had a really kind of key thinking about what we want the children to know, then we'd start to break it down further.
Yeah. And then within lessons throughout the week, we'll have times where we might have, who do you agree with, who do you disagree with, or we'll deliberately get things wrong. They actually really enjoy that.
They love that.
So you're working away on the board, they're maybe on their mini whiteboards and things, but you then make a mistake. And who can spot what I've done wrong? What could I have done? Why do you think I did that? Okay, here's another example. Let's put that in your journal. Explain, what do I need to remember for next time to make sure I, can calculate correctly.
Yeah.
Or as we say, we've got sort of 3 heads and things we know, sort of task design stuff that goes on. That how can we get our children thinking about what they're learning? So how can they justify a choice or disagree or
present their opinion in a different way? But we often give them STEM sentences to support that as well. But yeah, the 3-head one is quite a nice one where you've got something that you agree with, someone you disagree with, and maybe to someone that's not very sure, but getting them to explain. And the children, by the time they get to later on in the year when they're working with us, it does become more sophisticated in terms of what they're showing us.
Definitely. And it's not writing just for writing's sake. We're not just at the end of the lesson, okay, reflect, how did you feel you did today? Do you feel more confident? It has to be purposeful to the mathematical learning. It's part of that process. It's not.
Because there will be some children, won't there, who think, yay, it's maths, I don't have to do any writing because writing isn't their thing and maths is. And I guess, but what you're saying is, yes, words are important and the vocabulary is important, but there are myriad ways that you could actually record that. And, writing is part of that, but also drawing and pictorial representations and things. It was interesting. I was just having a smile to myself because my class were definitely adept at picking up at my deliberate mistakes that I made in maths lessons. Some of them more deliberate than others, I'll be honest. But yeah, I do think that's a great way to keep children engaged and keep them focused on what you're doing. Just to bring it back round to the purpose of the journaling again. So we know that it is about exploring children's reasoning and problem solving, as you've mentioned. I think one of the other benefits that it gives is the moving away from just a very simplistic right wrong answer and all the issues that can pertain to. So, for instance, I was at a conference again on Saturday in London, and we were talking about maths anxiety, and we were talking particularly about girls, and it was more secondary girls actually. We were talking about why a disproportionate number of girls choose to take A-level maths compared to boys, despite, even when you take out the sort of GCSE in England, GCSE attainment, girls who attain really well in GCSEs don't necessarily go on to take A-level maths in the same way that the boys do. We were talking again about maths anxiety. We know that can be prevalent in children who attain really well as children who find maths more difficult to access. And part of the issue we know can be that maths can be seen as very binary, yes, no, right, wrong. The answer is 42. It's either it is or it isn't. Exactly. And if you are either right or you're wrong. So do you see journaling as a way to expand maths beyond just that sort of right or wrong, and allow children to have a little bit more freedom within how they express those answers?
Yeah, I think 100%. I think it's that exploration, but it's also giving them that creativity, which is, you're right, you don't normally or traditionally associate with maths, because you're right, it is, you're either right or you're wrong. Show me in a chimney sum or a column addition sum, and that's it. But maths journaling allows children to dig more deeply into what they're thinking, but also have that time to show you what you're thinking and to just give them some thinking time about it and to be able to prove it. And I think that's where I was sort of saying, we're not always interested in what the answer is. We're interested in how you've got there and how you're thinking. And, oh, look, you've got a different strategy to, you show me a different strategy to Holly, but you both got the right answer. So how does that work? Or why are you thinking that? Or why did you think that? Or why did you assume that would work when it doesn't? So it's sort of adding that creativity into maths, which I think has been brilliant for the children that we've worked with in terms of building their confidence.
Definitely.
And thinking about their learner identities as well.
I'd say it's about that classroom culture. I think we're very good in other areas of the curriculum of building a strong classroom culture where every voice matters and where the children feel very seen. But in maths, perhaps not so much, because there is content to get through. It is, show me boards and right answers, wrong answers. And actually being able to shift that classroom culture towards that part of the benefit and the value is the struggle, that learning is actually really hard. And when we make small incremental little bits of progress in our learning, that feels good. Our self-esteem is boosted. Yeah. We're all capable. We are capable and can become really competent in different subjects with the right opportunities and with the right learning environment in place. But the thing for us is moving the sort of maths identity away from the I am good at maths or I am a maths person, to the sort of, with the children we have been working with, they're able to then articulate, like, I feel this is difficult because. So we're shifting with that use of language. We know the brain's really malleable, and by rewiring those connections and by going for different phrases, we can help to shift to a mentality that, I have this identity in maths or as a learner, but I can change that. I can work on that. That can improve, or I can feel better, rather than that's just what it is and that's just who I am. And that's a big thing for us, particularly with we were seeing younger and younger and you saying about that gender split within a classroom. That obviously puberty comes in, hormones and all the rest of it, and that self-doubt and that sort of feeling of maybe not or comparing to someone else, maybe not being as good as someone else, particularly for girls, seems to be happening younger and younger. We obviously know puberty trends and things are also becoming younger. And that all comes into it. And I think as teachers, we need to be aware of that whole child and not just focusing on the subject and content of the lesson, but what's going on for that child in terms of their learning, what's in place for them. And when we do take account of all of that, you can build that classroom culture where you're building everyone, you're boosting everyone, everyone's learning from each other. We're not ranking you. We're not, keeping a track of who's the best and where someone else is struggling. We're putting in place and being inclusive in how we're teaching so that we're ensuring everyone has success in their own way.
So I guess for us as well, sort of journaling reduces that pressure point. It's a really kind of low stakes approach to teaching maths. You don't have to be right. We're more interested in what you're thinking.
Absolutely.
So it takes that pressure off the child as well. They
Yeah.
don't correct.
No, that makes perfect sense. Thank you. What sort of age would you start this from in your schools?
I, having been as a nursery teacher at Earth Nutrient level, I would say nursery. And having children myself of that age, it's never too young. I think we talk about setting high expectations for children, and I think that's not about making work hard and more complex. It's about having that expectation of what they're capable of. And children from a very young age are actually very able to learn quite complex vocabulary. You notice with young children with the ability to reel off dinosaur names that are very complex and be able to identify the exact dinosaur it matches to. And I think sometimes we don't take that on board enough in terms of what we expect of them in the classroom. And we put up our own perception on things being difficult or challenging, when actually exposure to correct use of mathematical language, the correct vocabulary early on, will actually build a more confident child later, because they're using the correct terminology and they know what it means. It's not some abstract thing and a word that the big grown-ups use. It means something to them, and they're able to draw it or make it, at a young age with their connecting cubes or whatever it is. So I would definitely say nursery. They can mark make, so they can make meaning. They can talk, so you can get meaning that way as well. So they're almost never too young as soon as they're articulating, I'd say, or being able to mark make. It'd be my perspective. I know I'm a slight biased voice in the room.
I completely agree with you, and regular listeners will know my slightly ranty discourses that I'll go on sometimes about the fact that children in nursery and reception learn what trigraphs and digraphs and phonemes and things are in phonics. And those are technical vocabulary that I wasn't exposed to at school. And yet, children at age 3 and 4 are learning these words. And as you say, the dinosaurs are another great example, aren't they? If you know what a triceratops is. Triceratops, one of the most mathematical of dinosaurs. I love that. So you can definitely incorporate that. I think the reluctance comes from the adults' subject knowledge more so than from a child's ability to grasp it or not.
And I think that's important in terms of consistency across the board as well. Not changing that language that we start our youngest learners off, and then changing it by the time to get to primary 1. So they're not, they're having to relearn something. So I think it's about being consistent in your disciplinary literacy that you're pushing from a very early age as well, is really helpful.
I think actually, and again, I know that the systems are different between England and Scotland, but in England, the early years foundation stage, nursery reception before year 1, I think actually are often doing these things intuitively and part of just good practice in those settings. And actually it's at year 1 where we start to formalize learning a little bit more in maths, particularly, and sitting at desks and writing in books with squares in and those sorts of things. And at that point, maths can become, if we're not careful, it can become something that is very number focused, and we lose the language, and it becomes just about putting the right digits in the right boxes, which is not what maths should be, I don't think.
And by starting early, you're building that practice of articulating their thinking as well, that they're having that oral rehearsal with themselves. They can hear themselves explaining something, and then they can adapt, they can adjust, they can hear someone else's explanation and think, oh, does that fit with what I thought? Do I need to change it? You're building all of those practices early that then surely by the time they are in the later years of primary school, they're actually really competent in being able to do that. And that can only build for greater, success and their whatever achievement looks like for them in within maths or within all subject areas, to be honest, as well.
No,
So
I
having that
agree.
rich talk, we feel, is the real key to it all in the classroom.
Yeah.
Time is getting on from us. I don't want to take up too much of your holidays, and I feel like we could probably talk about this for days. I think it'd probably be something that we might come back to, actually, if that's okay with
Yeah,
you, because I
absolutely.
don't think
Love
I'm going to
to.
get through. I think I've asked about 2 of the questions that I was going to. But just to go back very briefly, because I took you off on a tangent, which I apologise for.
That's what type where we are in our week.
Yeah, it depends where we would be in our cycle. So we would have our brain dump that we've already talked about. We would have then our explicit instruction or our direct instruction, where we would be, I guess, traditionally teaching, but also getting the children to do their practice points. So that was where we would have we're not averse to using textbooks or worksheets, so we're not sort of anti that, but we would make sure that there were a point in that cycle where we were happy that they had achieved what we'd wanted them to know in terms of that conceptual block of understanding. And then towards the end of that week or the end of that block, we would have our real life context or our problem solving. And that we would often use as a sort of assessment.
Mhm.
So I think, so for instance, we were doing what we do usually back to addition, but a different addition strategies. But then our assessment at the end of that was to get the children to plan a Halloween party. So they were using their budgetary, their monetary skills. They were talking about maths, but they were describing it as fun maths rather than their kind of traditional perception of maths. But they were using all the skills and strategies that we talked about. We gave them sentence stems to incorporate in how they were going to present their work. So they had choice and freedom over that, which again, we feel is really important for their learner identity. And again, it's something that's not traditionally pushed in maths understanding or maths assessment. So I had children producing, cartoons, I'd done producing PowerPoints, I'd done producing posters, as long as they were incorporating different strategies for addition, as long as they had our sentence stems incorporated within that, then it was up to them how they presented that work. And that is a really kind of rich form of assessment, but also dialogue, because you're walking around, you're hearing what they're talking, they're using those stem sentences, they're reflecting on their work, they're bringing in different strategies. So we'll use a number line, I'd rather use a column addition sum, I'd rather use, whatever. But it's just brilliant to bring it all together. And that's a real kind of highlight once you've gone through that conceptual teaching block of kind of bringing all those teaching bits together and seeing the children really develop.
I think for us, it's that thing that, so much of the learning our children experience is very much, here's the teacher showing you, now have a go yourself. And I think for us, we need to have built in, particularly in primary, they're still very little. They're still, young brains, things that are memorable are things that they enjoy. When they talk about their school day, they'll hang on, and their highlight points are things that they have felt enjoyment from. And we need to be bringing that into our curriculum. We need to have fun. We need to be able to laugh with them. We need to be able to celebrate when they've done something creative and it's maybe not quite what we thought they would do, and it's off plan and and on a tangent. Because that's what sticks. That's where they can then hook their experiences onto. And then when they're thinking back, do you remember when we did those food trucks when we were having to do our budgeting? Oh, I remember that. Yeah, I made mine to do with whatever it is. And suddenly you've got that access back into that learning, but through a positive experience. And as I say, our whole mentality of children feeling good in school and children feeling good about themselves, it's providing opportunities that do give enjoyment as well. So I think it's important that maths doesn't become that subject where it is very much about getting things right and all of that, but that we do still have fun with it, that, you know, and things can be hard, and we can, you know, do these we do figure it out Friday is something that we like to do with them quite often. And it is that, oh, this is going to be hard. It's going to be like, I'm going to have to really use my brain for this, but actually we're going to manage it, and let's have a look together.
It has to make meaning.
Absolutely.
Make
And when I'm saying fun, I'm not meaning jumping around the classroom and things like that. We're meaning that enjoyment in the activity that you're doing. Absolutely. Yep. Sorry. Yeah. Um, yeah, there's certainly times when we do that. I think being in sort of two contexts, so obviously in independent school and then now in local authority school, there are schemes of work where there are sort of maths lessons or resources that are already there, but it's using your teacher judgment to have a look and say, right, this is what I'm teaching for this 40-minute hour block. Where within that do I really want some deep thinking? Where within that do I want an opportunity for the children to be able to share and to be able to talk? And then that can trigger that point of that's a journaling moment. Now, when we're saying a journaling moment, it's not necessarily that's all written down. As we say, a lot of the time it is the discussion, it is the conversation. But there may be a moment within that where you say, okay, you've now talked with your partner. So what are you going to hold on to? What are you going to keep for yourself so that you can look back, and that can help you with our next part of our learning. So it's having that moment, which time is the very precious thing within primary education, particularly when we're teaching all subjects, and having to have that sort of subject and knowledge within that. But it's just looking at, if I'm posing this question to the class, you know, verbally, and they're showing me on a whiteboard, well, could they put that in their journal and just hold on to it for that bit longer? Because once that whiteboard's wiped, it's gone. And that's fine for, you know, answering questions and things like that. We use them all the time. We're not dismissing it as a learning tool. But there are certain things that we need them, that need to last, that need to be there, that if it's not held on to and we're not referring back to it, we know that the brain learns by going over and over and over things. And if it's not there to have another read of or to improve on later in the week, then it's lost. It's the moment's past. So yeah, I think it's looking at opportunities where perhaps you would ask a couple of children to feedback and actually, no, I want everybody writing. And again, that's about that buy-in. It's about all the children working. It's not just relying on not catching the teacher's eye and hoping for the best, or the randomizer not picking you, or whatever strategy you're using. It's everyone is writing in their jotters just now. Everyone is journaling. We're all engaged in the task. So yeah, that's how I use it in my classroom. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
No.
We'd love
Yeah, we'd love that.
to talk all
Yeah.
day about
Yeah, we
it.
could, and I think that's actually really useful as well because often colleagues do feel like it's
Yeah.
an add-on or they're not sure how or when to journal. So actually talking through, I mean, we're not saying
No,
we've got it. I mean, we will often, we're not experts ourselves. We will often
and
pull
we're
on each other.
tweaking
We're
and
tweaking
changing,
all the time, but
adapting.
yeah, but just to sit down and say this is what we would think and
Yeah.
kind of bounce up is helpful.
Definitely.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we have LinkedIn, and we've also got Instagram under pace.learning, or our own email address as well. We're happy for that to be shared too.
yeah,
But we're
yeah.
yeah, that would be fine. We're at Research Ed in Edinburgh the 1st of November as well. So if anyone's going along to that, we would love to see you at our session. We'll hear some of what we've obviously spoken about already, but also sort of go into a bit more depth and connect. We would encourage anyone to give it a go. The benefits we feel are huge for children, and that I think our sort of favourite quote from one of our pupils who is English as additional language was that by journaling, it makes the secret language of maths not secret anymore. And it just unlocks the door to be able to access more of the curriculum as well. So that's sort of our reason.
That's a reason. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, please do get in touch. We'd love to connect.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.